Hello, and welcome to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I am your host, Shannon Vasconcelos, and I am joining you today on what is a beautiful spring day here in New England, where my guests that if you're watching this on video, you see them already, are also enjoying this spring day with me. And we have got a great show for you today. Coming up later on in the show, my colleague Aisha Wong will be joining me to answer your listener questions. But before we get there, we are starting out with my two guests for this first segment, regular guest on the show and my colleague on the education finance team here at College Coach Stacey MacPhetres. And
Hi,
hello, and I'm glad to see you, Stacey, but you're kind of old hat to me.
Got it.
Really excited about is that with Stacey, we have joining us Stacey's daughter and a rising college sophomore, just finished her freshman year of college, Delaney MacPhetres. So welcome, Delaney.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hi, and it's always so fun for us at College Coach, I think, when one of our colleagues is going through the admissions process with their family. And last year, I think there was the two of you, Delaney was going through the admissions process, and then Beth's son, Jack, was also going through the process. Jack guested on the show last year. And so now we're finally got you, Delaney. Your mom finally twisted your arm.
Yeah.
And what I think we wanted to talk to you about specifically is going through the college admissions process as a recruited athlete.
Yep.
And anyone watching the video, this is a silly question because you're wearing it on your sweatshirt, but just for everyone listening without the visual, do you want to fill us in on where you go to school and what sport you play?
Yeah, I go to WPI, which is Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and I'm on the women's basketball team.
Amazing. And so thinking back in time, again, you just finished up your freshman year. Can you think back? Can you even remember, is it all a blur, on how you started your college search and how did basketball play into that?
Yep. So I've played basketball my whole life. It's always been a passion of mine, a love that I've always had. And so the recruiting process for me was a little bit different because I started it in 2020. This is when COVID hit. So we didn't have an AAU season. So it was a lot more emailing. I was sending a million emails out, all three divisions, just trying to see what I liked, see what coaches I were responding, like who I like to talk to the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we went along into my junior year, I started to narrow it down a little bit more, talking to a couple Division II and mostly Division III schools. I really wanted to look for somewhere where I could have high academics as well as play a sport. I didn't really want to sacrifice the academic side because I've always done really well. I wanted to be able to continue that on as well as doing something that I loved.
That's awesome. And so you started emailing sophomore year of high school and then, is that what you said? And then visiting during junior year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As much as visits could happen because of COVID.
Yeah.
#COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned that WPI is a Division III school. Mm-hmm. At what point in the process, or did you at some point narrow down to Division III is going to be the best fit for me, or up until the end, were you still looking at other divisions, or did you consider schools where you couldn't play basketball at all?
Yeah, we had a kind of a running joke as I went through the process. We had a basketball school list and then a non-basketball school list. It was definitely always an option because you never know what you're getting into, the schools. And I definitely considered both. I feel like early junior year, I decided I wanted to go Division III because I really didn't want to sacrifice academics. And I wanted to be able to get involved in clubs and meet new people. And that option is a lot more limited when you go up in divisions.
Got it. And Stacey, I'll throw over to you, both as a mom and as a college finance expert. Choosing Division III has certain implications for college funding. Could you kind of explain that to listeners?
Yeah. So as she kind of went through the process, it's complicated being someone who does what we do and then also trying to remain agnostic in your own kid's process, which we tried very hard. But realistically, when she started, she officially really kicked off in her sophomore year, although she was approached by coaches starting in her freshman year, which was interesting and eye-opening for us because we had no idea where she was going to fall on the spectrum in terms of capability. So it very much was up to her, and she was very clear that she wanted to play only at Division III, but she also did have Division I and Division II schools, as she said, as her non-basketball schools.
Got it. Yes.
So we were very aware of the implications of not looking at Divisions I and II, where scholarship dollars are available for athletics. We recognized that she was going to focus on Division III. We were fortunate because she's also a very, very good student. So we knew that the trade-off for us was that she would be looking at potentially academic merit scholarships, while also being able to be a student athlete. So we were pretty excited about that prospect. So when her list came together, it was a pretty interesting combination of non-basketball and basketball schools, but also merit opportunities versus non-merit opportunities. So there wasn't that panic of, oh, she doesn't want to play Division I. We've now left scholarships out. We didn't. We just knew she was changing the type, which we greatly appreciated.
Totally. And I think it kind of shows, Stacey, why you and I have jobs, because this process is so complicated and there are so many factors feeding into it. Are we looking at athletic scholarships, at merit scholarships, at need-based financial aid, at student loans? There's so many different factors feeding into, and that's just the financial side of it, let alone all the, the academic side of things, the admission side of things, and putting all those puzzle pieces together can be a challenge. So again, it's fun when our own colleagues go through the process to see if they practice what they preach. Do you think you practice what you preach, Stacey?
For the most part, the final decision was hers. I will give her full and complete credit, and a couple colleagues on our teams as well. She was 10 for 10 in the admissions process. But it also obviously came down to a lot of difference, right? There was a lot of financial differences. There was a lot of academic differences. And at the end of the day, we as a family sat down and decided what was important for us. She decided what was most important for her. We looked at the differences in costs. And then, like everyone, we did sort of the, assign a value to the things that matter the most. And she made the final decision. And 1 year in, I don't think she could have made a better decision, both from the academic and, social aspect of things, but certainly being a part of the women's basketball program at WPI has been experience making for her. So.
That's amazing. And what were really tops on your list, Delaney? What did make you choose WPI in the end? What set them apart from the other schools you were looking at?
So basketball wise, as soon as I met the coach, I immediately clicked with her. I loved her. We were able to talk basketball, but you could tell that she also had the kind of like mom sense, like you're going to be on campus. She's going to take care of you. Like if you're sick, like she's going to make sure you have meds. Like she's constantly checking. I experienced that. She's going to constantly make sure that she's checking in. The same with the assistants. Like everyone was just so like welcoming, even when I had not yet committed. And then meeting the team, it kind of just made my final decision because my high school coach and my high school teammates were very close to me. So I wanted the same kind of like family vibe that I got. And immediately everyone was so welcoming, like asking me all these questions. Like they really wanted to get to know me before I even had decided that that's where I wanted to be. School-wise, WPI runs on quarters, and that was a huge draw for me. We run on 7-week quarters, which is a lot faster pace, but I like to work at a lot faster pace, and it's more hands-on, and the teachers you're able to get closer to them because it's a smaller school. So that was another huge draw for me.
That's great. And Stacey, I'm sure you, from your end, having that welcoming environment and the motherly coach, I would guess would be comforting to you on your end as you're letting your child go into the great big world.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So I will say throughout the whole process, we were ultimately able to visit a lot of schools. In the beginning, it was a lot of email, a lot of phone calls, a lot of texting, which is really neat. And families should know that. Coaches are going to text your kids, let it happen. When they revert from email to text, it feels good. But then when we did start to get to visit, I will say that she was very fortunate. She had some very good schools interested in her from a basketball perspective, and met some amazing people. But her coach, Coach Galasso, told me she knew visit one that she would end up there. I didn't know visit one, but I was very, very pleased with her decision. And it goes beyond basketball. I mean, we have found that the environment at WPI is nurturing as a whole, the academic support, student support. I'm sure you're going to talk about project-based learning because it's one of your favorite things. But that, had she not been a student athlete, I wouldn't have had that one person that I knew was going to be sort of that, as they call her, mom on campus. So it's pretty cool.
Totally. And how is the relationship with your teammates? I would envision, let me know if I'm wrong, Delaney, as a non-athlete over here, but as someone who went to college and works with lots of students who have gone to college, like that's a difficult transition, going to a place where maybe you don't know anyone and just adjusting to being away from home for the first time. I would imagine that having that family environment on the team makes that transition easier. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. That was one of a huge part at the beginning. It was definitely difficult. You're meeting so many people. You have to learn all the new systems in basketball, but also out of just living on your own, doing all your own things for yourself. I would say that having the team, there's so many people, whether it be classes or the same major, whatever you needed, they had probably gone through it. So you could ask them a question, even if it was something that you thought was totally silly, they would help you out. And then just having us over, they've been through it, they know it's not easy. So just everyone has each other's backs and everyone was able to help out at different times.
That's great. Do you feel a special connection with your fellow freshman women's basketball players? I think I've seen pictures on Facebook. Are there 5 of you? I've seen a crew on Facebook.
Yeah, there's 5 of us and we clicked right away. My roommate is on the basketball team, which was a great decision for us. And she's definitely one of my best friends. And then the rest, we're so close, and I'm living with them again next year. So it just kind of shows that you kind of bond together. We're all going through the same thing. We're transitioning into the same, people are going to do it differently, but we're all not home. We're all going through new basketball life. And it's just so nice to have people that you can do it with.
That's wonderful. And looking actually back on your search process, to go back in time a little bit, in retrospect, now that you have you're a year or 2 out from that process, is there anything that you would have done differently looking back on it?
I don't think so. I feel everything, obviously having COVID thrown in there was a little bit of a wrinkle for me. In the moment, it felt like nothing was going to work out. It felt like panic, and it probably feels like that even when you don't have a global pandemic, because you never know. It's all so unknown. You're sending an email and you may or may not get a response, or you could email a coach 5 or 6 times and then all of a sudden they're just not going to respond. And you just kind of have to go through that. And then you find the person or the coach that shares the same values as you, and then most of the time the team has the similar values, and I feel like that's kind of how you decide.
That's great. Stacey, how about from the mom perspective? Any advice that you would offer for those athlete moms starting out on this process?
So a couple things. I think if someone is really early in the process trying to figure out what their options are, look for an AAU program or a club program that supports the college search process. That was huge. Delaney was a member of Mass Frenzy her whole life, and the Frenzy organization was very instrumental in sort of connecting her with coaches that she thought might be interested in, who might not have connected with her. Prior to going to tournaments, they always provided tournament lists so that athletes could reach out to the coaches proactively to say, these are our game times, this is where we'll be. Like everything else in the college coach world, this is your student's process. You can encourage them, you can drive them, they should be doing this. If they're not doing it, you should absolutely be, not be driving it. Delaney was lucky that a huge part of her process happened during COVID when we were locked down and she had nothing but time. But you need to control the process. It's very lengthy. It requires a tremendous amount of work. It requires a lot of follow-up. So things like, we were thinking about this the other day, when she started her process, her sort of net of schools was probably about 40. And that was just because we had no idea where to begin. She was kind of like, well, maybe this or maybe that. Started communicating with those coaches, but of those 40, you might only have gotten 10 responses. What's also interesting, and you found this quite a bit, was once you're in the process, you keep hearing from new folks that you hadn't considered. So then you have to sort of recompartmentalize and decide, does this make sense for me? Should I include this school in my search? Interesting, different, but really important for parents to obviously be in the periphery, maybe prodding and helping. Student has to drive the process. Communication has to be in their voice, email, phone calls, texting. I remember vividly wondering where she was one day. She was pumping gas and one of the coaches called her, and she sat at the gas station for 45 minutes talking to a coach. Let it happen. Because that's how they're going to figure out where they belong. So I think, very much like everything else we talk about, it's the student's process. Be there to support. Obviously, you want to understand what it looks like, what the big picture is, what the campus environment would be, but beyond that, it's up to them.
Perfect. And Delaney, how did your first year go as a student athlete? Can you identify, what you found most rewarding about it, what might have been challenging about it in retrospect?
Yeah, I would say, like, looking back on the year, like knowing that like you did it and like you went through a whole season and you figured out how to balance college with basketball and figuring out how to make friends and all of the things that seem like so scary in the moment, like just looking back and knowing that I did it, I would say basketball wise, like if you're playing in college, you're probably one of the best players on your team. And then you go to an environment where you guys were all the best players on your team.
Right.
There's people that have all of this experience. And I think that the mindset that you have to have is really just like how much you want to learn. So like we're able to soak so much in, and I was able to learn so much, like in practices and games and watching film. It's just like there's so much that you have to learn. So you can't like get frustrated with yourself, like, oh, this isn't going well, I'm not learning this, because it's so different and it's so much. School-wise, I would say that I did a schedule, like hour by hour type of schedule, like when I knew I had free time, because we try to make it so that you're done with your homework for the most part before practice, so that you can just take a break. You can get ready for practice, you can practice, eat dinner, whatever after, and then start studying for whatever you have coming up. So I think that you have to be organized. You have to learn time management really quick, because you don't really have time to, especially 7-week terms, there's not really time to just fall behind and not be able to figure it out. So I would say that those are the biggest takeaways.
How much of your actual time does basketball take up in terms of practices, games, all of that good stuff?
On game days, it's a lot. I would say like the weekend games are different. Our coaches are very conscious of making sure that we have time to do what we need to do during the day. So on game days, we normally have like shoot around in the morning, and then you go to your classes, and then you show up to, depending on how early you want to be, like 2 hours before the game, so you can get taped and you can do what you need to do pregame. Everyone on our team had their own pregame ritual, and then we'd all end up at the same spot at the same time. So, and then you have the game, then you have post game, then you need to eat. So I'd say that that's more of a full day, but not full day, because you still have classes. But practices are probably 3 or 4 hours. It depends on how long your practices is. We would have film. After practice, you could stay and you could shoot. You would go to the trainers, you would get treatment. So you just kind of have to plan all of that into your day. I'm someone that has to be super early to everything, because I don't like the feeling of being the last one there. So I would show up super early to practices, which was a way that I would give myself a little bit of like self-care time, like walking to practice, being a little bit early is just like time where I'm not thinking about school and I'm starting to prepare for basketball.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And again, as someone who was not a college athlete,
Yeah.
I feel like balancing schoolwork is in and of itself a challenge, and that's obviously a huge commitment.
Yeah.
In addition to your schoolwork, but I can understand how it could be helpful also in kind of keeping you on task when you have practice that evening. Like, you got to get your homework done before that.
Yeah, I've always done better when I've been busy. So it was definitely an adjustment time-wise, but being busier helped me really focus and get my things done that I need to get done before practice.
Yeah. And Stacey had dropped into the conversation that project-based learning. You want to just explain a little bit about what that is?
So they at WPI, they try to focus more on not sitting you down for a test. They don't, like, obviously there's going to be classes where you have to have exams for understanding, but they, especially in the business school, I'm a business major, they really focus on collaborative learning. So they want you to be working with the people next to you. Like in every class I've had so far, I've had like a group, and like the group of 4 people, and we work together all year, and we're working on different projects. And like most of my classes, I have like a final project. So I'm writing a paper and I'm presenting it, and I'm not testing and sitting down and testing, which has not been something that I've ever loved to do. And so having somewhere where I'm just able to talk to people and work with people, and obviously my whole life I've worked with people, being on teams. So I think that it kind of just carried over, and it made it a lot easier for me, like understanding wise. Like if I have a question, the person next to me probably understands it. And they don't do pluses and minuses at WPI. They just have the A, B, C, so that you're not competing with the person sitting next to you to try to get the A plus over them or the A minus over the B plus. So I think that that was another big thing that they try to really push.
I love that. Save the competition for the basketball court,
Yeah.
not in the classroom. Stacey, I'm wondering from your perspective, I know you've always been super supportive of Delaney and all of her pursuits, including her athletic pursuits. What is the difference from your standpoint, transitioning from high school athlete mom to college athlete mom? How has that transition been for you?
It's a great question. And it's one that as parents out there listening, it's going to be very different for you. Your involvement will be extraordinarily limited, whether you were involved in high school or not. One thing I would tell everyone who plays college athletics, regardless of the sport, is in high school, if you are aspiring or would become a college athlete, recognize that you were probably a star athlete in high school. In college, you are going to be one of many star athletes, and just kind of prepare yourself for that. Things that you might have been involved in the past, you probably won't be going forward, which is not a problem. It's a growth period, right?
Right.
The other thing that I would recognize, and I want to underscore, because as I've talked to parents of sort of this year's athletes, so friends of hers who might be leaving high school, going to college, and parents would ask me what the experience was like. Even though she's at a Division III college, it's a very competitive athletic conference that they're in. It's obviously a very rigorous academic institution. You need to recognize that Division III athletics is not just hanging out, chucking a ball up. She is dedicating 4 hours a day of her time in season on non-game days, but also off season. So they started practicing unofficially as a team a few days after she got on campus. Her last workout before she came home was the day she came home. So don't consider it just whatever your season is. It's a full year process, and really sort of, as a parent, help your student recognize that they're going to build this into their world. Give her full credit for her time management. She did a great job. When she started calendaring and houring things out, I was like, okay, she's good. But recognize that, if you put sort of a timeline around it, for her, it was 4 hours. And it felt like 4 hours almost every day. Game days were more, but generally she built that into her day. Games and other experiences are a little bit different as well. You don't get to, you won't speak to the coach, if at all, unless you want to. Again, we have a great opportunity with her coach. During the recruiting process, if parents have an opportunity to spend a minute or two alone with the coach, they should. It should be separate from the student process, and the student should absolutely spend time alone with the coaches and the players. One thing that we've learned, and her coach said this to us, the coach that recruits you is not always the same coach you play for. One person is in one role as the recruiter and another role as the coach. Doesn't mean it's different. Doesn't mean good or bad, just different.
Right.
And I think in some ways you experience that, but at the end of the day, the environment that you sought was the environment that you found. Yeah.
That's great. And it's interesting, as you were both talking about the challenge of being high school superstar to being one among many superstars at college. The non-athlete nerd in me immediately thinks to the students that we work with who end up at very, very highly selective schools. And it seems to me a very similar experience where they were the superstar academic person at their high school. And it can be challenging when they get to this very selective school. where everyone is, just as smart as they are, and that they're not used to that experience. And some students can't handle that experience. But I think it sounds like, Delaney, you have handled sort of a similar experience very well.
Yep.
And taking it as an opportunity to learn from those other superstars around you.
Yep,
and whether it's at basketball or academically, that's, I think, the attitude that you have to go in with. So that's really great. And I think we're just about out of time. Any last words of wisdom for the students or the parents out there listening about this whole process? Anything you'd like to leave them with?
I would just say enjoy it. It's going to be a long process, but if you love it, you're going to enjoy it. So you always make the right decision at some point.
That's fantastic. Great. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. Stacey, I know it's part of your job. I won't thank you that much, but thank you very much, Delaney. This was a real treat getting to talk to you today. And I think you've been a big help to all of the students out there listening. So thanks so much.
Thanks,
you for
Shan.
having us.
Thank you, everybody.
You're very welcome. And listeners, stick around because we are answering your questions next.